I worked the night shift at the hospital, and I'll never forget what happened on this night. The hospital feels different after midnight. The air grows heavier, colder, like the building itself is holding its breath. The hallways stretch out forever, and the buzzing lights overhead flicker just enough to make you think someone walked past when no one did. Empty wheelchairs line the walls like they're waiting to be used. Around 2 a.m., I got a new patient, a woman in her late 20s, pale and shaking, complaining of chest pain and shortness of breath. She looked exhausted, like the act of standing was too much. I did what I always did. Took her vitals, pulse, blood pressure, oxygen, logged them neatly in the chart, printed a wristband and slid it around her wrist. Her skin felt cold, not clammy, not feverish, just cold, the way tile feels cold under your feet. She gave me a faint smile when I wheeled her into a private room halfway down the ward. "Thank you," she whispered. I set the monitor to track her, clipped the leads in place, then left her to rest. I noted the time. Everything felt routine. But an hour later, when I came back with her medication, the bed was empty. The sheets were neatly smoothed, the way housekeeping would leave them. The monitor still on, wires dangling loose, beeping faintly into the silence. The patient was gone. I paged security, and they searched the entire floor. Every hallway, every stairwell, every exit. No one had seen her leave. No alarms had gone off. I went back to the chart on the bed. My handwriting was right there. Pulse, blood pressure, oxygen, all logged clear as day. But when I reached into my pocket, I froze. The wristband, the one I could swear I had already fastened around her wrist, was still in my pocket. I pulled it out, staring at it like maybe it wasn't real. But it was. I remembered the feeling of it snapping into place, the way her hand brushed mine. I remembered everything, but here it was, unused, like none of it had ever happened. My heart was racing as I replayed the admission in my head. Every detail, the look on her face, the way her voice cracked when she thanked me, the coldness of her skin. I knew it was real. And yet, she was gone. When the sun came up, I brought the chart to my supervisor. She looked at the name, and her face went pale. That name had been in our records before. A woman in her 20s, same symptoms, chest pain, shortness of breath. Same wing, same room. She had died there years earlier. Some people told me I was overtired, that I'd imagined it all. But I don't believe that. I can still see her lying in the bed, thanking me in that soft voice. I can still feel her skin when I placed the wristband on her. And I'll never forget the cold weight in my stomach when I reached into my pocket and found it still there. The nurses still whisper about it. They say sometimes, if you walk past that room in the quietest hours of the night, you'll see her again, sitting on the bed, waiting to be admitted. I'll never forget that night. I took a leave of absence until I was ready to return to work. When I returned, I switched wings and asked for a morning shift. I learned that night that hospitals keep records of every patient who comes and goes, but not everyone decides to leave. Being a security guard at a hospital wasn't too bad. Most nights were calm, but felt like the shift would never end. This night was different. The shift had started like any other. I checked the parking lot, the emergency room entrance, and then made my way through the East Wing, my least favorite part of the hospital. Most of it had been shut down for renovations. The paint peeled from the walls, the floors were scuffed and dull, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in a way that made the silence even worse. Walking those halls at 2 a.m. felt like walking through a place that had been abandoned for years. Every sound echoed too loud. My boots, the squeak of my radio, even the rattle of an air vent down the corridor. I knew the East Wing was empty. It always was. But that night, as I walked past the numbered doors, something stopped me cold. Room 6. The door was cracked open. A faint glow spilled out across the hallway floor. That couldn't be right. Every door in that wing was supposed to be locked and dark. My logbook even confirmed it. Rooms 1 through 12, all unoccupied. And yet, I heard it. The steady beep of a heart monitor. I froze, my hand tightening on my flashlight. I pushed the door open with my shoulder and stepped inside. The bed was made, but the sheets were turned down like someone had been lying there minutes ago. The heart monitor glowed faint green, showing a steady pulse, but the bed was empty. I walked slowly around the room, every muscle tight, waiting for someone to pop out from the shadows. Nothing, just silence and the faint hum of the monitor. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, do we have anyone in room 6, East Wing?" Only static answered me. The air grew colder. I could see my breath, white mist curling in the glow of the monitor. Then, without warning, the beeping quickened. The green line on the monitor twitched erratically, faster and faster, before it suddenly flatlined. A piercing tone filled the room, long, unbroken, deafening. And then I heard it. Breathing, slow, heavy, directly behind me. I turned, sweeping my flashlight across the room. The beam caught on the window glass, and for a split second, I saw it. A tall, hunched shadow standing in the corner. But when the light steadied, the shadow was gone. The monitor clicked silent. The room was dark again. I backed into the hallway, my hands shaking, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. My radio hissed useless static. I forced myself to walk away, every step heavy. I told myself not to look back and to just finish the round and get out. But halfway down the hall, I stopped. Something inside me needed to check one more time, needed to prove the room was empty. I turned, slowly, and looked back at room 6. Through the narrow glass window, the bed was no longer empty. A dark shadow figure was laying in the bed, pitch black and thin, chest rising in shallow breaths. Its head shifted toward me, revealing dark, hollow eyes that seemed to look into my soul. I blinked, and the bed was empty again, sheets smooth, monitor silent. That was enough. I didn't step closer. I didn't try to explain it. I just got out of there as fast as I could. When morning came, I told one of the older guards. He just gave me a grim look and said, "Yeah, some people say he still checks in from time to time." I didn't know what to say, but now, when I patrol the East Wing, I walk faster past room 6, and I never ever look back at the window. I worked at a hospital in Mexico City, and I'll never forget what happened the night I took the elevator alone. It was around 3 in the morning, the dead hours, when most of the patients are asleep and the halls are too quiet. I had just finished checking on a patient in the ICU and needed to head down to the pharmacy. Most people hate using elevators at night in hospitals. They creak, they shudder, they groan like old bones. You always feel like the doors might open on something you weren't expecting. I stepped in, pressed the button for the ground floor, and leaned back against the rail, exhausted. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, flickering just enough to make the corners of the elevator feel darker than they should have been. The doors slid shut and the car lurched downward. But it didn't stop at the ground floor. The numbers on the display just kept ticking down to basement levels. I pressed the lobby button a few more times, hoping it would stop and go back up, but it just kept going. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors shuddered open, and I stepped out into a hallway I had never seen before. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of mold and rust. The walls were concrete, cracked and water-stained, lined with old gurneys and carts that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. A single fluorescent tube flickered above me, buzzing loud enough to make my ears ring. I should have gone back inside. I should have pressed any button and gotten out of there. But I didn't. I took a few steps forward, my shoes sticking slightly against the wet tiles. It was colder down there, the kind of cold that gets into your lungs. At the end of the hallway was a door. It stood half open, shadows spilling out from the darkness beyond. I told myself maybe I had stepped out on a service level I didn't know existed. Maybe the hospital had storage down here. But then I noticed the stains. Dark smears dragged along the walls at waist height, handprints, and from behind the half-open door came the sound of crying, software distant, like someone was weeping into their hands. My chest tightened. I called out to see if someone was there. The crying stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against me, thick and suffocating, like the walls themselves were listening. That was when the lights flickered hard, and for a split second, I thought I saw shapes moving further down the hall. Not patients, not staff. Shapes too tall, too thin, pressed against the walls like shadows trying to peel themselves free. I stumbled backward into the elevator, my pulse hammering in my throat. I slammed the lobby button, praying the doors would close. The crying started again, closer this time, echoing from everywhere at once. The shadows at the end of the hall stretched longer, bending toward me. The half-open door creaked wider, and in the darkness behind it, I saw the faint outline of a morgue drawer pulled halfway open. The elevator doors screeched as they slid shut. For one horrible moment, they caught on something, like invisible hands were holding them apart, and then they closed with a slam. The car jolted upward, the numbers blinking as the elevator ascended. When the doors opened, I was back in the hospital lobby, bright fluorescent lights spilling in, normal as ever. Everything looked ordinary, clean. I stumbled out, trying to steady my breathing. The security guard at the desk gave me a strange look, asked if I was okay. I told him I must have hit the wrong button and ended up in a basement. He looked at me confused. "This hospital doesn't have a basement," he said. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him what I'd seen or what I'd heard. But I never took that elevator again. And sometimes, when I walk past it at night, I swear I still hear the faint echo of crying, coming from deep below the floors, where no one should be.